up and down and crazy this last week and a half. And we were really excited yesterday when the US government chose to rescind the guidance they had issued last week. We're going to give you what information we know at this time. We do understand that this is an evolving situation. We will try and have more webinars like this ad hoc as needed as things continue to change. But we're going to share with you today, as of July 15th, what we know and how we are going to proceed with enrolling international students for fall 2020. Kelly Ortiz, I am the director of our International Students and Scholar Services. I advise our international students who have the last names that start with a C to the L or in the Z. I'm also the responsible officer for the Exchange Visitor Program, or the J-1 Visa program. And so I advise our students on the J-1 visa. I'm accompanied today by my colleague, Amanda Castillo. Amanda, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, good morning, everyone. So glad you could join us. My name is Amanda Castillo. I am the primary designated school official for our F1 program, and I advise students with the last names A to B and M to Y, as well as all of our sponsored students. And so I'm glad, to see so many people on the call. We're thrilled to be able to visit with you today because we know that this has been a very stressful time period.
For all of us. Just some housekeeping items. We do have everyone muted. We encourage you to use those chat and question and answer features to make comments or ask questions. We will definitely address those. You should be seeing my shared screen. And then we are going to go ahead and record this webinar, and we will put it on the ISSS portal. And so we'll refer people to that as well. We encourage you to share that with your friends who are not on this call and have questions. So today we're going to talk about the international travel restrictions, and particularly how they may apply to you if you're trying to return to the United States. We're going to talk about USU's quarantine measures for students arriving on campus, and then we're going to talk about the fall 2020 enrollment. So obviously COVID-19 has had an impact on our international student scholar mobility. As of March, the Consulate Department of State has actually suspended the routine visa processing services. If you don't have a visa in hand, you're in a very complicated situation. I have heard of some U.S. embassies and consulates starting to open up and process visas, but that's very hit and miss, and it's based on an individual embassy or consulate. So we do encourage students in that situation to reach out to those consulates and find out what is being offered at this time. Also, so many of you may be aware, President Trump has made several presidential proclamations restricting travel to the United States of America for individuals who have been in the countries of China, Iran, the European Schengen area, United Kingdom, the Republic of Ireland, and Brazil. So a couple of things on this. First of all, I have been receiving some notification from a colleague today from another institution. She indicated that she reached out to some of those consulates, and some of them have responded saying that students can actually apply for an exemption. So if you're worried that you are subject to this travel restriction, you may want to reach out and try to see if you can get that from the US Embassy or consulate in your local area. We do advise you that just because the embassy and consulate may give you an exemption, that doesn't necessarily mean that the Border Patrol officers are aware of that. Border Patrol is under the Department of Homeland Security. The embassies and consulate are under the Department of State, two separate agencies within the US government. We don't know how much they're talking to each other. So if you do get an exemption, reach out to us. We will write a letter to support your exemption. Carry your class, and even if you're traveling, wherever you're traveling from, I think you should carry your class enrollment for fall, showing that you are meeting a face-to-face enrollment requirement. And then any other documentation that you have showing that you have that exemption or you're able to travel, or that USU is up and running and holding in-person classes. Another way that we have seen a couple of scholars are actually working this. I did have a scholar, Chinese citizen, back in March, who had been in Malaysia for more than 14 days, and he was admitted into the United States because he had not been in China for more than 14 days. So the restriction, again, is on individuals who have been in these countries for more than 14 days. You may also want to be aware of restrictions on travel in the country where you are at. Last time I looked, and this is a couple of weeks ago, Australia was not letting their citizens exit the country unless they had applied for an exemption as well. So be aware of your local restrictions. We encourage you to reach out to your local government and also even the airlines to see what you can learn before you actually try and travel. Once you do arrive on campus, USU is in following the CDC guidelines to 14 days after international travel. I've also seen things that they are encouraging you to self quarantine if you've been in high risk areas in the United States. We have a colleague who has been in Louisiana and is going to be subject to that requirement to self quarantine before returning to work. So be aware of that. There is information on the USU website about how to quarantine. We will post also this PowerPoint so you can access any of these links after this presentation. USU on-campus housing is going to have a quarantine sign up. If you're not USU on-campus housing, you're staying in off-campus housing, I suggest that you reach out and talk to those housing providers to find out what accommodations they are making to support those who need to self-quarantine for that time period. Hey, Amanda, do you 2020?
So fall 2020, it has obviously been a moving target, and we were, excited to get the update last week. We've been waiting for some fall guidance, and like Shelley said, we were happy to see that they've rescinded some of that guidance because of the impact it has on international students. And so we're thrilled that our institution and many others, signed the amicus brief to support how crazy those requirements were across the U.S. So for fall at Utah State University, we still have students both here in the U.S. We have students who are abroad. And so we have some different challenges when it comes to how we look at, maintaining your status and what you need to do. So the new guidance, they've been updating this guidance. And so it's a moving target. It's going to change. I think there'll be more clarifications, but they did remove if you're taking anything online that you would need to leave the US, which is great because one of the things that USU is doing is they're moving online after Thanksgiving. And so that is not going to be an issue for Utah State University or any students here. They will not have to depart the US. But when we talk about registration, so students still need to be fully enrolled, and that's because we are open. We do have a combination of hybrid broadcasts and online courses, and students still need to be fully enrolled. So if you're an undergraduate student, you still need to take 12 credits. And if you're a graduate student, you need to take 9 credits unless you have an assistantship. For our J students, you still have to be fully enrolled as well. If you're eligible for a reduced course load form because you've completed all your course requirements, those are still an option, but you still have to meet the eligibility requirements for reduced course load. So if you're now doing research or if it's your final semester, you want to submit that reduced course load request because that's what's going to allow you to take fewer than that full-time enrollment. And that reduced course load request can be found on our International Student and Scholar portal. So when we look at that registration, so we're looking at students registering for at least 3 credits of that face-to-face requirement, so that we have physical presence. And USU did update their on-campus delivery options, and so that does include face-to-face, it does include hybrid face-to-face, and it does include the interactive broadcast. So Shelley has pulled up this. So you can find this information on USU's website if you look up delivery methods. And so those top 3 meet the face-to-face requirements. So any other combination that you're taking beyond that, you do have to meet. And so one of the, highlighted in here is that there's not an exception. If you don't want to take online classes and you don't want to take a mixture of 12, you do have to exit the US. Based on their guidance. We've been kind of going through what is this, what is online learning, what are the changes that they've made. And of course, when they rescinded this yesterday, we're like, okay, what do we need to process? How do we support students through this very challenging time? So I think the takeaway is make sure that you're taking as many, face-to-face classes as possible. We want to make sure that you're making progress, and whether you're here or abroad, making sure that this trajectory makes sense. So, we do expect to see some updates. We do expect to see some clarifications. But you want to make sure that you're at least looking at that registration now. So if you have questions or concerns, we're able to address them prior to the semester starting and get you into classes and make sure that we're connecting with those professors. And if you're outside of the States, making sure that you connect with those professors if you're having issues booking a flight, or if you're quarantining, making sure that you're not going to have any issues with either missing some classes because of quarantine, because again, you have to meet that physical presence requirement. And so getting you here and registered as soon as possible is going to work best for you. Now, the one thing we did want to clarify, based on the communication that we received, is that we're not going to have to reprint every single I-20 at this point. So that's good. A lot of people were anxiously awaiting that new I-20 with the hybrid remarks. And right now, you're as long as you have your I-20, you've got a travel signature, you have what you need to re-enter the country. Obviously making sure timing's going to be key. So as we receive more updates on this guidance or any changes, I'm guessing we'll have some questions. One of the things that you'll want to look at is just the course delivery in your MyUSU account. A lot of students, have a class that they've registered for, and they're wondering how do they determine if it meets that on campus. So if you look at the delivery method and your course details, you're able to see how that's noted and if we're going to be able to justify that as physical presence requirements.
Amanda, you actually have a question about that I-20, and it says, if the I-20 is not being updated with remarks, how does the U.S. Customs the requirement for 3 credit face-to-face is being met?
And so the kind of the challenge for us as we are developing this SEVP report, right, is that if you're here in the US, we still have to register you, just like any other semester if you traveled. The expectation is that you're going to be meeting the institution's requirements, and then we're responsible as your immigration officers to look that your registration has met that. So at this point, they don't need to see it. It's always helpful to make sure that you are registered. So if the border officer asks you, what is your intent, coming to the US, you're like, oh, I'm taking classes at Utah State University. And if they ask you if you're registered, you can easily say yes. And so again, early registration is going to help you know that you've got the classes you need, that you're able to, meet, the requirements. And then, we're responsible to make sure that you've actually followed through on that. So like any other semester, we're reporting your local address, your updated and biographical information, and that you've got that face-to-face requirement. So again, the burden of proof falls back to us to make sure that you follow up with that registration. I don't know if there are any other questions at that point on that topic. One of the things that we are hearing a lot, we do have students who, Shelley mentioned all of those countries that have travel restrictions. And so what if you can't return for fall? I've heard, that, students have border restrictions in their own home country in addition to being on a travel ban list. And so it's very possible that you may not be able to get here. And so, what we're looking at is how we can keep your record active, or if we need to reinstate you if you're returning for spring. So one of the things that if you're outside the US, obviously, you're not going to be taking face-to-face courses. So we want to make sure that we update your banner record so that it shows that you're taking online courses. So we're not looking for any physical presence. So you can send that email to usuintl@usu.edu. You can copy Shelley and I on those emails if you would like, but they're going to work with the registrar's office so you can take online courses and it can accurately reflect where you are. So that's part of what SEVP wants us to do, is make sure that your record accurately reflects what you're trying to do. And so when we're reporting that students are maintaining whatever status that is that you're online, in your home country. So if you're in your home country and you're fully registered, we are able to keep your SEVIS record active from what we understand in this documentation.
Actually, Amanda, can I interject?
Yes,
After
because it's
I'm actually reading the reverted to guidance, and this question says, if students cannot or will not return to school when in-person instruction resumes, should their records be terminated for authorized early withdrawal? And it says the answer is, once the school returns to normal operations, if students cannot or choose not to return to the United States to study, DSOs should terminate their records. So refer to the terminate article. So my bad, I'm the one that I told Amanda that this was how it was supposed to be. And then I found this additional guidance. So because USU is now offering face-to-face, then we actually are being given guidance that we have to terminate if you are not able. And then we would follow that second path. So Amanda, I'm going to let you expand on that a little bit. My apologies to everyone. That was my bad information when we were trying to understand all of this.
Yeah, so that's the caveat is that we're not back to normal by any means, right? We're doing this mixed hybrid offering. And so, but you are still, because we are doing face-to-face courses, as Shelley said, that's why that physical presence is required. And so it's nice that we're not required to reprint everyone's I-20. But if you're outside the US, we do have some challenges. And so we want to make sure that we address those and make sure that we're following that guidance. And again, because it's an interesting time, things may change, but if you're outside the US, your first step would be to send that email. So at least we can get you registered for courses if you plan to take them. So the second piece on this, again, this is, slightly modified as well. So again, if you do not want to take online courses and you don't want to be present, like Shelley just said, we would, you would be taking a temporary absence. And if it is less than 5 months, that 5-month rule, we're going to be able to work with you on right now. See, SEVP is having some flexibility with that 5-month rule for students who say left in spring. So the challenge, right, is, figuring out what's going to work for you. How are you going to be able to make progress, and where are you going to be? In general, right, if a student leaves and we terminate them for authorized early withdrawal, we would reissue you a new I-20. But if we're able to reinstate your prior I-20, we're going to try to do that. And so the reason why we would try to do that is that we don't want to have to make you pay a new I-901 fee. And so if SEVIS allows us to be flexible with that 5-month rule, and you've been gone for more than 5 months because of a spring departure, we're hopeful that this won't be an issue and you won't have to pay an I-901 fee. But of course, since this is a moving target, we can't ensure that. But that would be what we try first, is we would try to reinstate your record because you are not here for fall, and then see if we can do a data correction for spring. If we can't do a data correction for spring, it's going to be following the guidance on the screen. We would issue a new I-20. You would have a new SEVIS number. And this new SEVIS number, there is that fee, but our larger concern is whenever you get a new SEVIS number, it resets your clock. And when you reset your clock, that means that you might not be eligible for OPT or CPT, because those benefits only kick in after you've had a full academic year. And so if we can avoid that, we will. But again, if you're outside of the US, we're going to try to work with you as much as possible so we can get you back in spring if you're not here for fall. Anything you want to add to that, Shelley? Okay. Yeah, so go ahead.
No, I'm going to let you finish up. I just had someone at the announcement maybe yesterday, should we still need to register for at least one face-to-face course? And you've answered that and said yes, because USU is offering the hybrid model, and because we are offering that, that is why they have to, correct?
Correct. So like in a nutshell, the rescinding of the SEVP update that went out last week, the main thing that it resolves for USU is that students will not have to leave because classes go online for Thanksgiving. So that you know, we weren't worried that that was going to be an issue because it was only 9 days of the semester and it wasn't a change. We were including that in our operational plan. But we were grateful to see and have that confirmed that moving to online for 9 days is not going to be an issue. But you do have to maintain your registration throughout the semester. So if you're registered for 3 credits at the start of the semester and you drop that course, you're out of status. And so we need to make sure that you're maintaining that physical presence requirement throughout the semester.
All right, so then there's a follow-up question saying that the computer science department has a course named Independent Study or Directed Readings, which in banner states that it is individualized instruction. Does it come under the face-to-face instruction?
I would have to look at it. That has not fallen under face-to-face in the past, and I would assume it probably wouldn't at this juncture as well, because you don't have any physical presence required because it's arranged. And so in the past, we have not allowed that course.
So it took a research credits or dissertation or thesis credits?
The dissertation, thesis, or research, all are generally coded as face-to-face. So again, that's where looking at your MyUSU account. So if you have a class that you're curious, you know, is going to meet that requirement, register for it, look at the course delivery, because if it doesn't meet the course delivery, it's not going to fall under our radar either. So that's the easiest thing, is to look at your registration now and then look at how that class has been coded. And you know, some of it is logical, right? If you're doing research credits, you're typically in the lab, so you actually still have some physical presence requirements. So yeah, register, I think, is the best way for you to kind of sort through, does my class meet this requirement?
Now, Amanda, I've had a lot of students reaching out to me. Hey, Shelly, could you look at my course schedule and make sure that everything's good? And that takes a lot of time that we don't necessarily have as we're trying to deal with these other issues. Can you explain about the SEVIS registration process?
Yeah, and it ties in, I see, you know, a question about reduced course loads as well. So right now we're in the summer semester. At some point, we're going to transition our system to fall. And, you know, students can start to arrive to the US 30 days before the start of the semester and 30 days after. And part of what, you know, as DSOs, is we're also looking at that time period for registration. So we're not even able to register you in SEVIS at this point. And so to look at your record to see if it meets it, we're going to be doing that as part of our registration process. And if we see that you're deficient in some physical presence, or if you're not meeting the full-time enrollment, you know, you'll be getting emails from our office. And so the earlier you do that, the better, because usually, because students change classes so frequently, and because course delivery methods may change, we're not likely going to be looking at this registration until classes start that first week, with the hopes that you're all registered. And so your registration makes our job easier, because if we go in and pull a report and you're not registered, we can't do anything with your record, but it's not late yet. So we're not going to really be sending you messages right off the bat that you're not registered. We're just assuming that you're working at your plans. By the end of the first week, you start to lose the ability to register. You know, you have to get signatures after the first week. So registering early allows us to start pulling these updates and get you registered in SEVIS right off the bat. But yeah, right now we're not able to do anything with it. So looking at your record is actually clogging up, you know, the workload. And really, if you're looking at that course delivery in your MyUSU, and it is one of those on-campus delivery, you should be fine. And so, you know, definitely encourage you to take some initiative there, so you're not just waiting for an answer.
We have several questions. They're harkening back to previous things about the visa-related questions. I don't want to address them until I know that we're done. So any other things you want to add about fall 2020 enrollment?
So fall 2020 enrollment, I think, again, register now, look at what your course type is, make sure that you're in 3 credits that meet the on-campus delivery. You do not need a new I-20 that shows that we are a hybrid model. You just need to make sure that you're properly registered. If you're submitting a reduced course load request, there is not, we would love to see that by the first day of classes. So again, we can start processing your registration. And if we see that it's deficient, then we can see that you have an RCL. So there's so we would like to see that RCL by the first day of class if possible.
So you actually state that they're not going to be the updated Form I-20s with the remarks. The question is does that apply to incoming new students who have been or will be issued an I-20 and who still need to appear for a visa interview?
You know, they didn't provide clarification on that in the update. So, you know, I believe that admissions has been working to get that out to students. But at this point, pretty much everything that they sent out to us last week is out the window. So students who are in initial status, I think the biggest issue still is you're getting a visa. Like Shelly said, what's your documentation that shows, you know, if you've got your registration, great. But that's something that we'll probably get clarification on and reach out to our newly initialed students. But again, the bigger issue for students who are outside of the US is the visa. If you're here in the US, it's a non-issue.
So the answer at this point is that we don't expect to be issuing those updated Form I-20s, even for those who still need to apply for a visa. Correct. Okay. All right. I had another question similar to that. Apply for the visa at earliest 2 weeks before the starting date of the program, written in the original Form I-20 or the CETA system. In this case, it's the 17th of August. Do we need to modify the starting date in the I-20 to an earlier date? And I'm assuming this is related because maybe of the requirement.
If you're quarantining, you know, your program is not going to change that start date. So it sounds like you're a grad student in that case, and you have probably TA workshops that would have required that earlier date. And so I know a lot of things they're looking at offering virtually. So if you're here and you're quarantining, you know, orientation, I know is going to all be online. So that program start date wouldn't necessarily change. The challenge is that, again, based on your program start date, you're able to enter the US 30 days before, 30 days after. But if you're here in the US, that's a non-issue.
So I think you just answered that question. So to amend it, as long as they can enter within 30 days after that program or start date, then we don't need to update it. It's only if they are not able to enter 30 days. So in this case, she indicates that it's August 17th, as long as she can enter the country by September 16th.
Yeah. And again, so some of those things where Shelly mentioned there's two different offices. The later you get, obviously, the harder it may be to enter a country, because what a border officer is going to look for is your ability to be in status. So if you've missed a month of classes, it doesn't matter if we're in 30 days or not, because that's going to be the challenge, is that at some point we have to register you within 30 days of classes starting. And if you're not here in the US and you go to a border, that officer has every right to turn you away because you've missed more than 30 days of classes. And so really, if you're going to be pushing that 30-day window, you know, the first week of classes, I've never had students have issues. The second week of classes, you know, usually like you can still add courses, and they can go to our website and see that you can still get an instructor's signature to add courses. When we get into the third week, having verification from your department that you've communicated that you're arriving late, but you're maintaining, you know, that you're able to keep up on the homework, or that you've notified them of your late arrival and that's not going to be an issue, that might be helpful to have. Again, making sure that you're registered and in communication with your professors is your best bet. But anything after that third week, it does begin to get a little dicey, especially if you're not enrolled and you're not in communication with because if you get here and you've done no registration, it's going to be impossible for Shelly or I to get you into courses and therefore register you, and you'll have to exit the US anyway. So that border officer is just being careful to not let you into the US to then have to have you exit.
So actually someone says, what is that specific document that confirms registration?
Well, you can just print off your registration, would be one of my recommendations. So you can go into your MyUSU account and you can print your registration schedule. You can print your registration history. You can print your transcript. Any of those documents are going to show that you have courses for the fall semester. I personally like to see your active schedule. So, you know, like if you wanted to print off your active schedule, that's a helpful document. whether they need it or not. You know, is that they're not going to be able to see your registration if we haven't registered you and provided you a new I-20 that says as such. So that documentation is just basically your evidence when they say, you know, how are you going to maintain your status? Or, you know, you're late to the arrival of classes. You're like, oh, I've registered. I've been in communication with my professors. They know I'm coming on this date, you know.
All right, let me kind of go through. Sorry, I'm trying to sort them, and I think I might just start reading them in order, so we might not follow a coherent train of thought, but let's go with this.
That sounds great.
This student says, regardless of the pandemic, I was planning on leaving for this fall semester and coming back for spring 2021. At this point, do you see any risk if I leave for authorized early withdrawal this August and request an I-20 reactivation for spring 2021?
There's always risk because, again, this is a very fluid time. The risk is probably more so what happens in the world at the time that you're trying to return. You know, we have no idea if new countries will be added to the travel restrictions list. We don't know if students will have issues because they'll have border closures. You know, and again, what SEVP is saying is for now, we're going to be a little flexible with that 5-month rule. But how that actually plays out. So if you are out of the country right now, you know, and it's only been, if it's been less than 5 months, I don't think we'll have an issue. SEVP is saying that they're being flexible because of COVID-19. But again, we're relying on that they stick to that flexibility in 5 months. So I think that those are some risks that we can't control, but we will do our best to try to work with you if you've been out of the country for more than 5 months. I don't think you'd have an issue if it's less than 5 months. It's just a matter of how are you going to make progress if you're planning on registering, and what does that look like?
Sorry, I am typing in, so I also know what I've answered. So give me a second. Let's see. If I take all the courses with online and I'm not going to get the assistantship, do I need to take 9 credits? I am a graduate student.
If you are a new graduate student and not an assistantship, yes, you need to take 9 credits, and 3 of those credits should be on-campus delivery.
I'm also going to say, based on this, it says if I take all the courses with online, if you take all your courses online, we cannot register you in SEVIS. That's correct?
Correct. And so that's back to the, you know, whether you want to or you choose to take online, yeah, that doesn't meet our requirements. And the guidance specifically states, you know, that if a student chooses not to follow that if it says specifically, if a student is simply unwilling to take a full course of study because it's only offered online, they should request a temporary leave of absence. And so that's where we're not going to be able to register you unless you have that physical presence.
Bear with me, multitasking. Says, will hybrid face-to-face be considered to meet the face-to-face requirements?
The new hybrid face-to-face, again, you know, I'm going to refer you back to that on-campus delivery. So you should be looking at that on-campus delivery and making sure that your courses meet that. The hybrid face-to-face is a new one, and that one is on the on-campus delivery list.
All right, I've got a question that I don't quite understand. It says the earliest schedule I should follow is applying for a Social Security number on the 21st of August of 2020. This is an MAE department grad student.
So I know that we're trying to schedule an appointment, I believe. And so I think, you know, if you've got a Social Security need that meets, that's going to be up against your arrival, right? What you need is to get an offer letter. That offer letter is going to be your first step to getting authorization from our office to see if you're eligible for that authorization. And once you have the offer letter from the employer, the employment authorization from our office, you'll take all of those materials plus your documents to go get a Social Security card. What Social Security requires is that you have a job. And so you have to show evidence that you have that offer first But because you're an international student and you're only allowed to work when it's authorized, that is why you would be submitting a request in our portal. So if it's for CPT, you're going to submit a CPT request and you're going to upload that employment offer. If it's for OPT, you're going to submit an OPT request. So those things are going to be in conjunction to you getting that offer letter. That offer letter is a part of, the CPT application. If you're applying for OPT, you don't have to have a job offer, but you can apply for Social Security until you have a job or you request it as part of the I-765 work authorization.
So actually, though, I'm going to read into this a little bit because the earliest to apply, let's talk a little bit about maybe incoming. What do we offer our Social Security trip?
So there's a couple things that if you're an initial status student, again, that 30 days before the start of the semester, we can make you active if you're registered and you have a local address. Social Security, as Shelley was just saying, we normally do a Social Security trip, but Social Security is not currently open. They're doing everything versus a web interview. So you do the web interview and you schedule that through Logan Workforce Services. So I think before you jump to running to the Social Security office, we're going to have you do those other steps. We're going to get you that authorization letter, and then we can get you information on how to schedule that appointment and what documents to take with you. But we do need to see registration and a local address so we can validate you. And as long as you have that, we can do that process. But again, because you're looking at some work authorization with it, all of these things kind of have to happen at the same time. So it's not impossible. If you know where you're going to be living, we can move forward with that.
Sorry. Bear with me. Okay. Is there a mandatory online orientation for international students?
There is, and you will receive communication from the Student Orientation and Transition Services Office, also known as SOTS. And Stacy is the person who sends out that communication, and she works with our A team members. You can find out more about, so there's 5 modules that are online, and that kind of moves you through the orientation process. And then she's going to be sending out information because there is going to be an orientation on the 24th. So you'll be able to participate it. I don't know that, I think it's going to be available after that. But again, since it's not our program, I believe that she's going to have that orientation available for you. So if you're in quarantine, you can do it online. And then you basically just work through some different processes because again, since we're trying to do that virtually, you'll have some opportunity to engage with some other people. Shelley and I were part of that process. You'll be watching an immigration orientation. And then, of course, as you have questions, you'll be reaching out to us directly.
Next question is, does Grace semester count as face-to-face?
The Grace semester has always been listed as a face-to-face. So again, register for it. You'll see that. If you haven't, with the Grace semester, right, you're only eligible to register for that after a successful defense. So after you've successfully defended, you're going to submit a reduced course load request through our office, and then the School of Graduate Studies will register you for that course.
Are there any arrangements by the U.S. Embassy to give visas to incoming new grad students in countries where they are unoperational or they only attend to emergency situations?
Unfortunately, I would say no. I think we've had some people reach out and ask about going to a third party, provide. So like some embassies do provide visa services to other countries. But again, many of those aren't open either. So I think the biggest challenge is, as Shelley mentioned earlier, is that exception to see if you're eligible. I don't remember exactly what that was called, Shelley.
So the exemption was actually for travel restrictions, okay. But also they have indicated that they would process a visa in an emergency situation. Most of the time, they have not deemed students as being in an emergent situation, but at this point, it wouldn't hurt to reach out and ask.
Yeah, I do think it's definitely worth asking if there's any way that you could be considered emergency. The U.S., doesn't consider, student, an issue, where they do consider, current work visas for COVID-19. They considered that, but it may vary a little bit from embassy to embassy and country to country, because a lot of international countries, even Canada, for instance, they allow students, through the border because it's seen student participating in school is a vital part of all things, and it's deemed essential. So it's definitely worth asking.
All right, next question says, I'm Irish, one of those countries that have the travel restriction. Thinking of going to Croatia, not a banned country, and staying there for 14 days before coming to the US. There are no direct flights, meaning I will stop off in a banned country. I would not leave the airport, but I don't know if this is allowed.
I believe that if you have a stop in a banned country, I would actually follow up with the airport to see what their guidance is on that. I know that, just the act that you were in a banned country as your stop point, I would think that would cause you issue. And so, I've heard of, I would send it out to the airline. Mm-hmm.
I agree with following up with the airlines. I've actually read some other banter that has said that because if you do not go through immigration in that country, you should be okay. But if you do go through the immigration process, then that's something different. But again, verify. This is a lot of stuff that our colleagues in International Student and Scholar Services across the US are all trying to figure it out. And I haven't seen a solid answer. I don't have a case that can say yes or no. We're just trying to guess.
Yeah, on the CDC's page for the travel ban countries, it does say that, if you've been to one of these countries for 14 days, and then it does list, I think it's 15 or so airports that you have to enter through. So there's certain ports that you come through, and I think there's only 15. And if you do travel to another country, making sure that you are there for 14 days. So I had someone tell me that, you want to make sure that you're there for 14 days. So don't count the day that you arrive, if you get there late in the afternoon. So making sure you're there for a full 14 days.
Another question says, I am in New York State now and transferring to USU. Can I apply for Social Security number with my offer letter and other materials before arriving to the USU campus?
I would say it would depend on how they're doing the web interviews. I don't know if they have set that up to do that remotely, if they're able to do those remotely with you being remotely, but if you have to be physically present in the office. So again, I think that would be, once you've submitted those materials, then we can find out if that's possible.
And I think my other question is you need to have an active SEVIS record that you had mentioned. In this case, they have probably an active SEVIS record at their current institution. The record at our institution is in initial status. And if the offer letter is from USU, would they accept that, or do we need to have the
transfer? If you're waiting to transfer, the transfer would need to take place first, and then we would need to make you active. And so, in order for Social Security to see that you're eligible, you have to have an active record. So we do have to transfer that. So if your transfer isn't happening till, whenever that's scheduled, you could probably talk to your immigration advisor at your current school to see if that can be modified. There may be reasons that you haven't changed it. Many students are on OPT up until a certain date, and they don't want to have their record transferred until after employment ends. And so, patience.
All right. Let's see. It says, I am a new graduate student, so I don't have the F1 visa yet. And if I can't visa and I need to be in my country, do I need to take face-to-face classes? I need to take only online classes, don't I?
If you're in your home country, all you can take is online classes. So.
All right, correct on that one, exactly. The only reason you're getting the visa is to allow you to have physical presence in the United States. And if you're not being present physically, no need. Next question says, before I enter the US, could I get an authorization or for an RCL or at least something to show to prove to the border officers that allows me to register less than 12 credits?
They don't see your credit registration, so you showing evidence of an RCL is non-essential. I think more so what's important is that you submit that request and get registered. And then what we do in our system is as soon as we get to the point where we can actually register students, again, your process and being on top of that helps us do that, earlier, but we're probably not going to have you registered in the system by the time you're traveling. And so I think, again, you're a graduate student, it's your final semester, whatever it is you're doing. Is I'm attending Utah State University. Most of them aren't going to ask you for that evidence. So this is just kind of a backup for you. So when we approve your reduced course load form, you don't get anything physical, right? What you do is you get an alert in the system that lets you know that we've processed it. So again, depending on when you're traveling, we may have not had that processed yet. But I don't think I've ever had a student be asked, I need evidence of your RCL being approved. So again, just submitting it, we can, review it, make sure that your registration is accurate. But until we're in a period where we're registering students for fall, that's not going to happen until then.
Next one says, does a new incoming students need an updated I-20 form showing the school is hybrid and all the courses are not online?
We already addressed that. At this point, based on that SEVP being rescinded, we will not be providing new I-20s stating that we are hybrid. So we had planned on doing that last week and they gave us a deadline and that's been called off the table unless we receive something else.
The next one says, I need to apply for an exemption and they require confirmation that USU will hold in classes. How fast can I get this? Amanda, do you mind if I answer this one?
Go for it.
I'm going to actually say, if you do USU COVID, you should be seeing me typing this here and Googling it as we're talking. I would use the information on this page to show that, yes, we are holding classes and there's information about the on-person campus thing. The other thing is, as your personal immigration advisor, if you reach out to me and you're applying for that exemption and you need a letter from me, I'm happy to write something to support this application. So,
yeah, I would just make sure in your email that you're clear in what you're asking for. So if you need an exemption letter, please state, why and what you're planning on doing.
Okay, is there somewhere on here? I know I've seen it before. Now that we're live, I can't find it. It says
if you go to the full update timeline, it shows it in the release that when they announced that that we're going to have a mixture of online and face-to-face classes.
So right here, this one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you should have received some of your emails as well. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think those emails, especially the emails where they show what your registration is and all of those. But yeah, those updates are great documentation.
All right, I think I finally got to the very end, other than there's one question at the very beginning. And Amanda, I'm going to have you look at it because in my role, I can't read all of it. It gets to a certain point and then doesn't allow me. So I'm hoping it's close so you can read the entire question. Is the first one close?
Let me see if I can close some things because it's not letting me scroll up. So hold on. All right, give me just a second to get there. What's the first question?
It says, I have a visa related question. I left the campus back to my country at the end of March. Now all my flights are back to the States are canceled. And the only flight I can get now is on August 20th. But then I'll be out of the States more than 150 days. And then it won't allow me to read the rest of that question.
And is that under the chat or the Q&A?
Q&A.
Okay, give me just a second. Again, it's not letting me scroll up either. So give me a second. Okay. I just see ... as well. So I think that they didn't write anything more than that.
That or exceeded the character limit.
Mm-hmm, yeah. So.
All right. So let's go ahead and we can follow up afterwards and maybe have them contact their advisor directly.
I don't think that that's going to be an issue just because of the exceptions that they're making for active student status. So basically in our SEVP report, we said as long as students can return, we will keep you in active status and register you for fall. So if you're getting here on August 20th, the biggest issue is that you're going to need to quarantine and reach out to your professors if you're not able to start classes on the 31st.
All right.
Mhm.
And let's go back to our PowerPoint and let's keep moving on then.
Great.
I think we want to talk a little bit about resources. If you don't mind, I'm going to drive a little bit and show people exactly where some of these resources live.
That's great.
Go to iSSS.usu.edu. It actually will bring you to our portal. What I've done here is I've pulled up this COVID-19. Under the COVID-19, we have frequently asked questions. A lot of the issues that we've addressed already, we address and provide the answers directly in here, along with links, some of them to the different sites, different forms. So this is a really good resource. If you can't remember or want a quick reference to what we've talked about here, this is all here available to you. Also here under the International Student Webinar Series, this is where we are actually posting these webinars. You can see previous webinars that we've done this summer, including the international travel updates, a lot of which we've addressed in this webinar as well. We talked about, there was a webinar on visa and deferrals. So I know a lot of questions have come in about that process as well. If you have questions about how to use the portal and do forms, we have tutorials. We also are slowly adding more tutorials here about different kinds of requests. So if you want information, this is what we're trying to do as our staff has been reduced and demands are increasing. We're trying to give these recorded advising sessions to help you so you can initiate the request and then we can review that and make it easier for you without that need of trying to find time to schedule with us as advisors on our limited time frame. So that's the portal, lots of good information. And again, that first, any form, anytime you want to make a request, this is actually the best place to go, is go to the form and find the corresponding request. There's learning content, which answers a lot of information. And then once it's submitted, we actually prioritize submissions in here in our workload, but we try and get these done first in order to make sure that we're responding quickly to the completed requests and getting what you need. Is making an appointment with your advisor. Whoops, my apologies. So if you go to global engagement, I had this page, and you go under international students and scholars, you can schedule an advising appointment. And here you have links and information. We want to let you know about Sarah. She's our new peer advisor. So Sarah has been working with us on creating a lot of these tutorials. She is helping us to get a lot of infrastructure in place to allow advising sessions that are not directly with us as advisors. And as such, we've empowered her to meet with you and work with students to get them prepared to complete those requests before we have a chance to address them, especially again when we have limited time right now. So we encourage you to reach out. Sarah will have some standing appointment times, and she also has walk-in time. So 11 until 1, she is available if students call in or want to make a quick WebEx appointment with her. She is available. And then she will have standing appointment times at 1 o'clock and 1:30 for students to schedule time to meet with her to get assistance with preparing some of the requests that you need to work on. USU COVID-19 page, which I already showed previously, a lot of information on that page. We refer to that one quite frequently, especially as you're trying to show to other people what it is that USU is doing. Amanda, anything else you wanted to add to this?
No, I think it's just, you know, I guess one, we want to let you know that we're thinking about you. We know this has been a really challenging time and we appreciate all your patience as we're all pulled in a lot of different directions right now, and you guys are jumping through a lot of different hoops. We so appreciate your resilience during this time period because there are a lot of unknowns, and so, please reach out to us as you need to make appointments, as if we haven't answered your questions and you have other concerns. But like Shelley said, do look at the resources because you'll find a lot of answers there, and you won't have to wait for a response. So be patient with us. I think if anything COVID has taught us is patience. And but again, we do look forward to seeing you online, on the phone, or whatever way we can connect. We will be doing some events in the fall. We're going to be doing a Meet the Advisors event, and we'll probably include everybody on that. So whether you've interacted with us, again, a way as a touch point. So watch for more information on that. And again, we wish you all the best in your travels and your registration, and glad you could join us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.